I never thought my marriage would hit a point where I'd be questioning everything I believed about trust. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 5, and I thought I knew her better than anyone. She was the kind of woman who always appeared polished, calm, and in control. She had this way of making everything feel safe and predictable. We planned our anniversary trip months in advance, a little getaway to celebrate a decade of us, just us, in a cozy hotel by the coast. I remember packing my bag that morning, feeling a flicker of excitement, like we were starting a new chapter. The first day went smoothly. We wandered through the city, laughed over dinner, and shared a bottle of wine on the balcony of our hotel room. I went to bed that night feeling content, until I saw her phone. I'd always been the kind of guy who trusted her. I didn't bother checking her messages unless she left her phone around, which she rarely did. But that night something made me glance over while she was in the bathroom. The screen was glowing, notifications popping up. I saw a message from someone named Mike, a name I'd never seen. Before saying, "Can't wait to see you tonight, been thinking about you all day." My stomach immediately clenched. My heart pounded. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but I told myself to stay calm. Maybe it was just some innocent flirtation. Hell, maybe I was overreacting. I stared at the message, then scrolled up. There were more. Photos of her in a hotel room, leaning close to a man I didn't recognize, their bodies practically pressed together. I saw her smile in one shot, her eyes half-lidded, her hand resting on his chest. The evidence was right there, all in black and white, or rather in glowing pixels. I felt my hands tighten into fists. My mind raced. How long had this been going on? Was this the reason she'd been distant lately? She'd been working late, canceling plans, brushing me off. Something was off. I looked over at her just as she came back from the bathroom, her eyes catching mine. "Hey, what are you doing?" she asked, voice light, unaware of the storm. "Just checking your phone," I said coldly, holding it up. Her face froze, then she tried to grab it back. "Hey, give that." "No," I cut her off. "Who's Mike?" Her eyes widened and she hesitated for a second too long. "It's nothing, just someone I met here." Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly masked it. I felt my blood boil. That nothing was the last thing I wanted to hear. I had proof now, clear as day. The woman I'd trusted most, sleeping around with my best friend, while I was out trying to make this trip special. It was like my entire future was collapsing in that one moment. And that's when I realized. They both thought they had me fooled, just like so many other times. But I'd caught the lie and I'd never let them see me break. Instead, I started plotting my revenge, slow and deliberate. They could think they were clever, sneaking around behind my back, but I was about to turn the tables. That night I couldn't sleep. My stomach was twisting like a knot, my mind spinning with questions and fury. I knew this wasn't just about catching her in a lie anymore. It was about the betrayal of everything I stood for. I didn't want to just walk away and pretend like nothing had happened. No, I needed to make sure they understood the cost of their betrayal. I got up early the next morning, still feeling the weight of that discovery. I went through my things quietly to find evidence that would make my revenge airtight. I knew I needed more than just a few texts. I needed proof, something undeniable. So I checked her emails, her social media, even her deleted messages on the cloud. What I found made my blood run colder. There were messages from her talking about sneaking around, plans to meet late at night, promises to keep it secret. I downloaded everything, saved it on a USB, and started planning my move. I didn't want a messy confrontation in the heat of anger. I wanted my revenge to be precise, ruthless, and final. I knew I had to be careful. If I made a scene, I might lose control, and that wouldn't serve my purpose. But I also knew I had to confront her, face her, and do it in a way she wouldn't forget. I'd been her husband, a man she trusted, and now I was about to remind her what that trust meant. As I sat there staring at the evidence I gathered, I realized she'd crossed a line I never thought she'd cross, and I was about to make sure she paid for it. Not with tears, not with pleas for forgiveness, but with a lesson she wouldn't forget. That was just the beginning. After gathering all the evidence, I felt like I was carrying a weight I couldn't drop. It sat heavy in my chest, making every breath feel shallow. I kept replaying that moment in the hotel room, her face caught in that initial freeze when I saw her telltale texts. I kept thinking about the way my stomach dropped, the cold sweat that broke out on my back. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. By the woman I loved, by my best friend, by the promise of 10 years together. But I didn't want to act impulsively. That's what they expected, I thought. They wanted me to lose my cool, to chase after her, to flip out. That's what betrayal does. It tries to make you lose your mind. Instead, I decided I'd play it smart. I'd wait for the right moment, then strike hard and clean. I spent the next couple of hours planning. I contacted a friend who was good with computers, and I had him help me create a plan to get full proof of their affair, something that would hit them where it hurt, without leaving me looking like the crazy ex. We agreed on a few things. I'd record a conversation, get her to admit everything, then confront her with undeniable proof. I knew it was risky, but I also knew I needed to see how far she'd go. I needed her to say it out loud at least once so I could be sure. I also set up a hidden camera in the hotel room just in case. I'd leave her no room for denial. When I told her I wanted to talk, she seemed surprised, almost defensive. That was good. That meant I'd hit her where it hurt. Later that evening, I called her into the hotel bar. I kept my voice steady, low and cold, like I wasn't the same man she'd been married to. "We need to talk," I said. Her eyes flicked with a hint of nervousness, but she nodded. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I found your phone," I said, laying it flat on the table. "I saw your messages, your little weekend affair with Mike." Her face went pale, her lips parted like she wanted to deny it, but I kept going. "Don't bother, I've got all the proof I need, the pictures, the messages, everything." I pushed the USB across the table. "And I've got more. I recorded your voice admitting it. You really think I'd be stupid enough not to catch you?" She stared at me, tears gathering in her eyes. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered. "Oh yeah, because it looks pretty damn clear to me," I snapped. "You and Mike sneaking around while I was out trying to make this weekend special. You're supposed to be my wife. How could you do this to me?" She looked away, trembling, her voice breaking. "It's not about love, it's— I don't know, I was feeling trapped and I made a mistake." I shook my head, feeling a mix of rage and heartbreak. "A mistake, that's all you're gonna say?" She looked at me then, desperation in her eyes. "Please just listen, I never meant for you to find out like this." I felt my jaw tighten. "No more excuses, I want out. I want you to leave tonight and I want the keys to our apartment. We're done." She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I could see her realizing she'd pushed me too far. I'd planned everything and I wasn't planning to let her slide away easily. As she packed her things, I felt a strange calm settling over me. I'd finally uncovered the truth and I was ready to take my revenge. But I wasn't just ending the marriage, I was going to make her regret it. Later, I sat alone in the hotel room, staring at the evidence on my phone. I knew I had what I needed to destroy her world and I was just getting started. I wanted her to feel the pain of betrayal just as I had. I would show her that trust is a fragile thing and once broken, it can't be repaired. The next step was clear. I had to prepare my plan for the ultimate revenge, something calculated, precise, and unforgettable. But first, I needed to watch her leave. See her realize what she'd lost. That would be the moment I knew I'd won. I looked out the window, the waves crashing below, and took a deep breath. My fingers trembled slightly, but I was already plotting, already imagining how everything would unfold. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. And I was going to do it. The hotel lobby was surprisingly quiet that morning. I watched her from the corner where she was hurriedly stuffing her things into a bag. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying all night. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. On the one hand, I knew she was finally leaving and I'd made her face her betrayal. On the other, I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling that I'd just begun a whole new chapter of pain, one I hadn't fully prepared for. She kept glancing back at the door, probably wondering if I'd come after her or try to stop her. Honestly, I was tempted. Part of me wanted to shout, scream, demand she stay and fix it all. But I knew that wouldn't be the smartest move. Instead, I kept my distance, calm and steady, waiting for the right moment. When she finally stepped out of the hotel, I followed. She didn't see me immediately, so I took a moment to absorb her. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of her guilt, her suitcase rolling unevenly over the uneven pavement. The cold air bit into my skin, but I clenched my fists, feeling the adrenaline spike. I caught up to her at the taxi stand. "Hey," I said softly, catching her by the arm. She turned, startled. "What do you want?" she asked, voice trembling. "I want you to understand exactly what you lost," I said quietly. "You thought you could cheat on me, lie to my face, and walk away. But I've got everything, I mean everything, on you. The messages, the recordings, the photos. You're not just leaving with your pride hurt. You're leaving with a scar that'll never heal." Her eyes flickered, and she looked like she was about to break down. I felt a strange sense of power surging through me, but I tempered it with cold resolve. This wasn't about revenge in the heat of the moment anymore. It was about sending a message she'd never forget. I continued, voice steady and sharp. "I want you to know that I'm not giving you a second chance, not anymore. Whatever you had with Mike, whatever lies you told yourself, those days are over." She looked down, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to become this. I don't know what I was thinking." "I do," I said, voice low. "You were thinking about yourself, about satisfying some stupid thrill while I was planning a future with you. Well, guess what? That future's dead now, and I'm done pretending that I don't see what you've done." She finally looked up at me, eyes swollen, and whispered, "Please, don't ruin everything." "I already did," I said coldly. "And now I'm going to make sure you regret it for the rest of your life." Without another word, I handed her the keys to our apartment. "Here, your stuff. Take it and don't come back. I want no contact. If you try to reach out, I'll know, because I've already set up everything to make sure you don't forget how badly you screwed up." She looked at the keys, then at me, still pleading silently. I felt nothing but a hollow satisfaction. Let her go. She made her choice. As she disappeared into the taxi, I stood rooted to the spot, watching her drive away. My chest felt tight, my palms sweaty, but I knew this was just the beginning. Now I had the perfect setup for the next phase, one she wouldn't see coming. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. Time to finalize the plan. I'd already done most of the groundwork, but I needed one last thing before I moved forward. I opened the app I'd used to record her voice, just to double-check that everything was clear and ready to be used. The sound of her voice, trembling but honest, echoed in my ears. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to happen." That one line sealed the deal. I was going to use it to make her see that she'd lost everything: trust, respect, her marriage, and most importantly, her dignity. I knew I had to be careful, but I also knew I'd won. Her betrayal was the bombshell that shattered us, but I was about to drop the aftershock. I was going to make her regret crossing that line. Walking back to my car, I felt a strange calm wash over me, an odd sense of clarity. I had everything I needed. This was no longer about anger. It was about justice, about closing that chapter for good and making sure she paid the price. I already had the perfect trigger, waiting for her to realize she'd lost everything. I just had to execute it now. And when I did, I knew she'd understand, finally, that trust isn't something you can take for granted. It's a fragile thing, and once broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. It took me a few days to get everything in place, but honestly, I felt lighter after I finally handed her the keys and watched her walk away. That moment was a kind of closure I hadn't even realized I needed. I thought I'd feel angry, maybe even broken. But instead, I felt a strange calm, like I'd taken control of the chaos, like a storm had finally passed. Still, I knew better than to think it was over. No, this was just the quiet before I unleashed the real plan. I'd spent those days gathering audio clips, writing down every detail, and setting up the perfect timing. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal, but I also knew I had to be careful not to overstep. I wasn't interested in just hurting her. I wanted her to understand she'd lost something irreplaceable. I sat in my apartment, staring at the evidence I'd accumulated: screenshots, recordings, and a detailed timeline of her actions. I played her voice again, hearing her say, "I'm sorry." That one word, so full of guilt, was my secret weapon. I planned to send it to her along with everything else at just the right moment. I set the stage carefully. I created a fake email account, one that looked like an anonymous tip. I used that to send her a message. "You should know I've got everything. The recordings, the photos, you can't hide from this." I made sure it was vague enough to pique her curiosity but clear enough to make her panic. What came next was simple but brutal. I waited for her to respond, for her to try reaching out, any sign she still cared. Sure enough, she emailed back, begging for explanations, trying to deny and justify. I kept quiet, letting her squirm a little, then I sent the audio clip. Just a short, raw recording of her voice admitting everything, her trembling words, her whispered apology. The silence on the other end was deafening. I knew she'd heard it. I knew the moment she realized her secret was out for good. That's when her phone started ringing nonstop. I let her have her moment, just long enough to feel the panic set in. When she finally texted, I responded with a simple message. You wanted to hide, but you can't hide from the truth nor from me anymore. I kept it short, cold, and precise. I wasn't interested in giving her false hope. This was the end. I watched her lose control from afar, her messages full of apologies, pleas, and promises to change. But I didn't reply. I just kept quiet, knowing I'd already taken everything that mattered to her. Her dignity, her marriage, her peace of mind, all gone. In the days that followed, I stayed distant. I didn't contact her. I made sure she knew I was right there, watching, waiting. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, every moment I could make her suffer with guilt. I wanted her to remember that once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. But I also felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life from the ruins she'd left behind, about showing her that actions have consequences and that I was done being the fool. The thing I kept coming back to was how she must have felt knowing I had everything, that I'd turned her own betrayal into my weapon. I imagined her packing, trying to figure out what I might do next, and knowing there was nothing she could do to undo it. That feeling, I realized, was the real power. So I stayed patient. I knew I'd get the final closure I needed when the time was right. But I also knew I had already won. She crossed the line, and I'd made damn sure she'd never forget it. I learned something through all this, something I think everyone should remember. Trust isn't a given, it's fragile. And once it's gone, it's nearly impossible to get back. If someone proves they're unworthy of your trust, the only real choice is to walk away. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just making someone feel guilty. It's making sure they understand the pain of losing something they thought was forever. The fallout was immediate and, honestly, more satisfying than I expected. She disappeared from my life without a trace, or so I thought at first. I blocked her from every social platform and changed my number. I didn't want to see her messages, her calls, her apologies. Instead, I focused on the quiet aftermath, how she was reacting, how she was suffering. I kept tabs through mutual friends and her social media accounts, if she dared to post anything. Every time I saw her online, it was a reminder of what she'd lost. A woman I once trusted implicitly, who had turned betrayals into a game and thought she could get away with it. But I wasn't about to let her just slip back into her life after what she did. Not without consequences. I wanted her to feel the sting of what she'd thrown away, her marriage, her dignity, her peace of mind. In those days, I felt an odd mixture of relief and emptiness. It was like pulling a thorn out of my side, but the wound still stung. I knew she'd be hurting, maybe worse than I was. I'd done what I set out to do, expose her, humiliate her, and make her regret her choices. But I also knew that the true test was how I handled myself moving forward. One evening, I finally decided it was time. I drove to her place, the same one she'd tried to cling to after leaving. I had the final piece of my plan in mind. She answered the door, surprised to see me, but I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. "Look," I said, voice calm but firm, "you thought you could cheat, lie, and get away with it. You thought I'd never find out. Well, I did, and I've got proof more than enough." I pulled out a sealed envelope which I'd prepared earlier, containing everything. The USB of her voice, the screenshots, the emails, all neatly organized. She tried to speak, maybe to beg or explain, but I held up my hand. "No. No excuses. This is the end of the line for us. You're done, and I want you to remember exactly what you lost." I handed her the envelope. "Take this. Look at it whenever you're ready to face what you did, because I'm done. I'm done pretending I didn't see the truth, and I'm done being the fool who trusted someone who didn't deserve it. Her hands trembled as she took it. Her eyes were filled with tears, but I didn't feel pity. If anything, I felt relief, the kind that comes from knowing I'd finally closed that chapter. I turned to leave, and she called after me, voice cracking. "Please, don't do this." I didn't mean for it to get so out of control. I looked back once, and there was something almost pathetic in her face. "It's too late for that," I said. "You made your choice, and now you're paying for it." Walking away, I felt that familiar heaviness return, like I'd just stepped out of a storm, but underneath it there was a strange sense of peace. I'd taken control of my life again, and I'd made sure she understood the cost of betrayal. The final part of my plan was simple. I'd wait a few days, then go to the courthouse, file the divorce papers, and start the legal process of ending everything. I wanted the official separation, the finality that would leave no room for her to come back or pretend it didn't happen. As I sat in my car afterward, I reflected on everything. How I'd gone from shock to rage, to planning, to execution. I realized that the most important lesson here, something I'd advise anyone facing betrayal, is that trust is fragile, and once broken, it takes a conscious choice to rebuild. But sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away and make sure the other person never forgets what they've lost. The road ahead won't be easy. There will be moments of doubt, of regret, but I know I did what I had to do. I reclaimed my dignity, my pride, and my future. And I learned that revenge isn't about hurting someone else just for the sake of it. It's about restoring your own sense of justice, making someone feel the pain of what they've thrown away so they never forget. And as I pulled out of her driveway, I knew I'd made that happen. The day I handed over the divorce papers was one of the clearest moments I've ever had. I'd gone to the courthouse early, sat in the quiet, sterile room, and signed my name on the final documents. The weight of that pen was almost symbolic, marking the end of everything she tried to destroy, but also the start of something new for me. As I handed the papers over to the clerk, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. It was done. Later that afternoon, I drove to our apartment, the place that had once been our sanctuary. I knew she'd probably already moved out by then, or at least was trying to. I hesitated for a moment outside the door, taking a deep breath. I remembered all the mornings we'd shared, the good times and the bad. But I also remembered the betrayal, the lies, the way she'd shattered the trust I thought was unbreakable. In my hand, I carried the key to what was once our home, and now just a symbol of her betrayal. I inserted the key into the lock, turned it slowly, and watched the door swing open with a creak. It was empty inside. No sign of her. Just the quiet, echoing space filled with memories I'd now leave behind. I looked around, feeling the sharp sting of loss but also a strange sense of liberation. Without hesitation, I took the envelope I'd prepared, containing her voice recording, all the proof, and a note I'd written. I placed it on the dining table, then slowly turned and walked away. I didn't want to stay to see her reaction. I just wanted to make sure she knew the damage was done, that she'd lost everything she thought was secure. As I stepped outside, I felt the cool air hit my face, and I realized I'd finally taken back control. It wasn't about revenge just for the sake of hurting her. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and knowing I'd refused to be a victim of her betrayal. I turned her own lies into her downfall. Driving away from the apartment, I looked at the horizon, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't need to carry her betrayal anymore. I'd done what I set out to do: expose her, end it, and move on. The pain would fade, but the lesson wouldn't. Trust is fragile. I learned that the hard way. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to fix. In the end, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't about revenge at all. It's about standing tall, refusing to be dragged down by someone who betrayed you, and making sure they understand they've lost what they took for granted. That's the real victory. I closed the door behind me for the last time, stepped into my new life, and felt a quiet, steady resolve. The past was over. The future was mine. And no one, not her or anyone else, would take that away from me again.